Okay, welcome back again. In today's video, we're going to be talking about these metal tools, oftentimes referred collectively as the IASTM tools, instrument-assisted soft tissue mobilization. That's a mouthful. Bottom line, what we're looking for is using these types of tools to perform various massage type techniques. A lot of this is originated out of a system called Graston, so I want to give its due awareness and let people know where this came from. And this was a system of soft tissue mobilization that was taught toward chiropractors and physical therapists. And you can read a little bit more about their philosophy and how this came about. I think a lot of times the philosophies of some of these systems have definitely been called into question, especially as a lot of research is performed about some of the claims. So I won't dive too deep into that, but you should read that stuff before you go into this. And one of the reasons why is I'll explain the intention for using a tool has a lot to do with how you will use the tool and also the design of the tool. So for example, I would say that a lot of systems still believe that you're breaking up scar tissue and adhesions when you're doing massage therapy. I've addressed this a number of times throughout my videos. That is really a questionable concept as to whether or not this occurs. And certainly, in my opinion, with your hands and with elbows and using these types of tools, I really don't think that we're breaking up scar tissue and adhesions. So first and foremost, when we select a tool, we shouldn't be thinking about it in terms of how aggressive we can get with it, but also, as you're going to see with some of the designs of the tools, the surface of the tool also might be made for the intention of doing some of those activities. So if it's not possible to break up scar tissue and adhesions, then we don't want to be selecting tools that have certain types of edges and so forth with those intentions, because that's not really what's happening, and it might make the tool less effective. Okay, so first and foremost, I'm going to go through a few of these different tools. These things used to range from $1,200 or more for a set of these different types of tools. Now you can see them everywhere. If you go to Amazon, they're a dime a dozen. And they all, to some degree, have some degree of usefulness. People oftentimes comment under videos, why don't you just use a spoon? Well, you could use a spoon, but the edges are a little bit different and the utility and so forth, and that's why you see a lot of these different types of designs. They can be more effective, especially for the professional therapist. So when I look at tools like this, for example, the MyoBar, one of the reasons why I first reached out and grabbed one of these bars was for working on areas that have a larger surface area, let's say the outside of the quadriceps, the hamstrings, the calves, and in particular was to save my hands. As you hear me talk about this a lot of times, hands take a lot of abuse over the years of doing soft tissue therapy, so I'm always looking for tools to help get the job done better and also reduce the strain on my body. So this type of tool was really good for that purpose, for gliding over the tissues. I really like it. The only thing that I don't like in particular is the surface area is quite small, or you could see the width of this. So sometimes when you use an area that's very small and it isn't very wide and you scroll over an area, it's not as comfortable as having a larger contact point. So that can make a difference on the tool. So this kind of tool to me is a staple to have in any program, which is a larger tool that's easy to hold on to, less hand fatigue, and we can actually just push with the arms as we're scrolling through the tissue. Now, mind you, this pressure bar is not for inducing tremendous amounts of force. That's not what it's about, is digging down and pushing too hard. You'll see on a lot of videos that talk about Graston or IASTM that people are using excessive amounts of force and it's bruising the skin and the tissues with these sorts of things. That should not happen, okay? And a lot of these systems, like for example, if you look at Graston videos, do not, look down on that. As I said, that's not what we teach. So be very mindful of what you watch out there. When I use these tools, I'm using moderate to light amount of pressure. If I see any kind of tissue irritation or skin damage, it means that you're pushing way too hard or you're not using the appropriate amount of lubricant, which we'll talk about. But this kind of tool works really, really well. From there, what I went to is to have a small tool, and this one in particular is again by the same company, MyoBar, which I liked, which was this type of tool to get into areas like inside the hands and so forth. You could see that it has a very pointed edge to it, but it is not sharp. It's very rounded, and that kind of rounded edge is quite comfortable. Okay, this tool tends to work really well on the neck and so forth, but it's for very refined, very specific work, and I find it to be really helpful. The problem that I do have with some of these tools is how thin the handle is. This can present a problem because, especially for someone like me who has large hands, I have to use a pincher grip in order to use this thing. And when you're repetitively moving, it causes fatigue. Right? So it is hard to hold, in particular when you're switching between techniques with your hands that require lubricant and you're using this, your hands are sliding all over these things. So that is one of my pet peeves with these types of tools, and nobody really seems to aim to resolve that much. So the other tool that I like to use is the edge tool. The edge tool looks about like this. That does solve one of the problems, having this kind of a handle so that you can work it like this along the tissue. It does have a somewhat sharper edge. Not to say that this is a sharp edge by any means, but it does have a sharp edge with it. And sometimes I believe, and I'm going to show you here in another tool, is to slightly pull or to grab on the tissue or the skin to try to tease that, to get that response of feeling a little bit of skin pulling while you're doing it, which is going to assist with what we call the neuromodulation of the technique. It has a number of different edges to it, a small edge, a quite broader one for larger areas. And of course, you know, the handle is very helpful too, and that can be used for larger areas as well. So that is one of my favorites to use. Now, this tool in particular, it was called the fat tool or the fat stick. The fascial abrasion technique was another one. I got this tool in particular, it was recommended to me because of the surface on it. The surface on it is a bit gristly, and again, for the intention of kind of pulling on the skin when you're using the technique. Now again, if you were to use this on the skin without any lubricant, you would see a lot of redness in there and probably some skin damage. So these things are not meant to be used without the appropriate lubricant. Okay, so when you use the appropriate amount of lubricant, you should be able to perform the technique. It is normal to see a little bit of redness or what we call hyperemia. It is not okay to see damage in the skin, like for example, the next day seeing a lot of bruising. Now, I will show you real quick the kind of lubricant that I do recommend. There's a lot of these lubricants out there that are very expensive. They're like $40, $50 for a little tub of these things. But I can promise you one of the best things to use for this that works really, really well is just alboline. Alboline is a moisturizing cleanser. It's oftentimes sold as makeup remover. It has paraffin wax in it, mineral oil, petrolatum, and some beta carotene and so forth. It has the perfect kind of lubricant for using these tools and not irritating the skin. So I do recommend that. Now the last one I'm going to go through is the kind of the newest one that I've had access to here. It is called the T-bar. The T-bar is really interesting, tries to solve a couple of problems that we've seen with these other types of tools. Number one, it is designed with a handle on it. So the handle can be held like this, okay, anywhere you prefer, and it has a number of different edges on it. One of them is a little straighter here. This one has a curve and it is not sharp, so it can be used much in the same fashion as this tool. But I like it a lot more because it has a handle on it. In particular, one of the areas that I like to use these types of tool on is the plantar surface of the foot. That's the bottom. If somebody is dealing with plantar fasciitis, for example, I will be working the bottom of the foot. It's quite fatiguing with a lot of repetitions to do. So I do like this T-bar in particular for the bottom of the foot. We can do a lot of repetitions without too much fatigue. It has a great little surface on it, and I can hold the top of it while I'm working the tissue. Now, the smaller edge here, or the less wide side, can be used for more detail work, so that's helpful. Again, being able to grasp it with your hand. And also, some people will use it like this, so which is flipping it to the opposite side to be able to push down. The only problem or downside I see here is that this center section is not long enough for someone with hands like mine. So this can be a real challenge, even to the point where I've had to custom have some T-bars made for me so that I can do pressure work without my hands getting all scrunched up like this. But if you have a smaller hand, this tool is going to be really, really useful for you to use this side. Broad-based contact area for distributing pressure, which feels pretty good to the individual. So bottom line with this tool, this is kind of my new favorite here to be using because it's really easy to use with my hands. But again, as you see and we've talked about, different shapes of tools are going to be better for certain areas. It's really hard to make a recommendation to get one tool that will work for everything in the body because it doesn't really work that way. So for example, I did find that this one is a little bit harder to use on the spinal extensors. It is a little bit easier to use something like this on the spinal extensors, and sometimes this. This does not work very well on the spinal extensors, and clearly this doesn't either. So I would prefer to use this on, for example, the lats. You can lay on the side and work this, but any broad-based or larger diameter muscle group areas, hamstrings, outside quadriceps, and so forth. So my review of IASTM tools is definitely have something that is a larger bar for bigger contact points. You need to have something that's a little bit more refined. So these two are your options. The smaller kind of MyoBar, doesn't have to be a MyoBar, anything that you recommend or that you find out there that looks good to you. The T-bar is a good option here as well. And especially if you're a therapist putting in a lot of time where you need something to hold on to because your hands are getting too tired with some of these other tools, or the edge tool as well if you want something with a little bit of a sharper edge on it. Okay? So IASTM, again, going back to this larger concept, make sure that you have a proper therapeutic approach and you're using tools to achieve a certain outcome. Okay? So if you don't have an outcome that you're looking to achieve, more mobility, more range of motion, etc., then you can use these tools all day long. It's not going to matter because you do actually have to do something with them. Learning a little bit more about how to implement these tools into a larger system is usually necessary to get the maximum effect out of these tools. But certainly if you're just looking to treat any individual area for a given problem and you already have those other elements handled, I think it's a good investment. So if you have any questions, feel free to comment below. And of course, give me a thumbs up and a like, helps with making more of these review videos. And you can check out these products at the links below this video as well. Sam Visnick here. Thanks for watching.